This is one of the bigger builds in a while, guys. Like, it's got some really big changes, and there's a lot of theoretical things to think about for the future, too. Not a lot of concrete stuff to test. There really wasn't anything to test this week, but there is some big things to talk about, and I really, really, really want to hear your feedback on some of this. So we're going to go through everything that's been kind of revealed or data mined or whatever posted about on the alpha build this week. And the main thing we're going to start with is Demon Hunter. So they got some big changes. Now, if you've been following the, kind of discussion that we've been having here across however many videos it is now, we talked about tanks that are the most changed a lot, right? So I'm going to recap that real quick because I think it's important. So the tank that I believe got the biggest change for its own benefit would be Brewmaster. They pretty much redesigned a lot of the ways that they deal with damage, especially with Celestial Brew. Probably the single biggest spell that any tank has acquired. And of course, they also got a lot of other utility and some really nice things that are returning for Brewmaster, like Touch of Death and Clash. So I think they are the tank that has the biggest single change, and it's the one that is the most beneficial for the class. The second the second most changed tank is the tank that changed in the wrong direction. So that's Warrior. I talked a lot about that, but like basically their talents, a lot of synergies are being put on the same talent row. Like right now they have all these offensive synergies and things like keeping Demo Roar up all the time. Now that's going to be a lot harder to do all these things. They did change some talents to kind of re-fortify them defensively, but they're going to lose a lot of offensive potency, and they are going to probably lose some defense too along the way. So they're the tank that changed a lot, second most, but they're the tank that changed for the worst, the most, right? And then the tank that got the most volume of change, so third most changed tank would be the Blood Death Knight. That's a tank that got probably 10 changes. I mean, they got so many, they got a bunch of spells back, a bunch of things, interactions and utilities and stuff that are going to be really, really, really good. See how they play out in 5-mans. And even though some of it might be a little boring or basic, I feel like just having this option, now you could effectively heal yourself when you're out of range with Lichborn and all that. You could potentially prevent fears and all these different things with all these, all these new interactions are going to be really interesting. And the big one, of course, is seeing what happens with this sacrificial pact ability for the fact that you could take a control undead and kill it. So we talked about this a couple builds ago, who knows. But anyway, a lot of these things it's very voluminous. Let's put it this way, Blood DK's changes. It might end up being the best tank, but I'm very happy to see that they got this many changes. And then the tank that kind of had maybe the most groundbreaking change. It's yet to see. I've yet to see if it's going to be the biggest change, the best change. Might not even be a good thing. It might be a bad thing, but that'd be Paladin, Prop Paladin, number 4. They are a paradigm shift has occurred for Prop Paladin. Let's put it that way. They have had the Holy Power system reintroduced, and that is going to significantly change how they deal with tanking. Apparently to the point that they're actually going to have maybe potentially too many resources, especially as the expansion goes on. The more haste and all that they get. So I'm really interested in seeing that, mostly because of how much extra potential they have to do interactions with the group now, right? Because the heal, we talked about this a lot in these videos, but I really like the way that Prop Paladin has had its kind of paradigm shift from this very stringent, straightforward, you make this one choice, you get this one thing back. Now it's wow, we have so many options, we have so many choices. What can I do with these choices instead of, should I make the choice now or later, right? That's kind of how it feels for Prop Paladin. And then Bear, they're the 5th one for sure. They have the tank. They've always kind of had the tank niche solidified. I didn't feel like they were going to ever change anything about how Bears tanked, right? Which is something that for some reason a lot of people wanted. They wanted a groundbreaking change for Bear. They're not getting it, but they did get a lot of small buffs, and I think what they needed the most was an actual CD that was good for both offense and defense, and they got that now. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like. Also, some key talent changes and stuff that's changing with Bear. So I'm pretty excited for that. But then the tank that changed the least up until today was Demon Hunter. Now I'm not going to re-rank these, but this is where it's at coming in today. I feel like it's important to understand that because the only changes Demon Hunter had, I mean, there's a couple things, but the main thing was that they kind of reshuffled some of their talent synergies. The whole demonic thing for Vengeance was cool. Fell Devastation being baseline. These are really cool things. I liked it, but it didn't really have a huge impact on it. And especially a lot of Demon Hunters felt like they lost something, and the talents were already still kind of boring. So we're going to take a look at what changed today or this week. It's a very big deal. All right, so anyway, if you haven't seen this post, it also talks about Havoc. We are not going to talk about Havoc today. We're only going to talk about Vengeance, okay? So we're going to read every one of these things. There's a good amount of stuff here, okay? So Immolation Aura and Fiery Brand tooltips were changed to show the total amount of damage over the duration of the spell. So that's fine. I don't know why that's brought up, but I guess it's important. This is a big one here. Maybe one of the biggest things. Soul Cleave damage increased by 20%. Now, I think they could go further with this. I think they should go further with this. But either way, let's read the developer notes, because this is really important to read. This is the most important thing that you can get out of this section, is this little paragraph here, okay? We often see that Soul Cleave is a low priority button because the passive consumption of soul fragments means no healing is lost if it isn't pressed, and Spirit Bomb offers more damage and healing per soul fragment. We made a change already that adds additional healing to Soul Cleave for each orb consumed, but we're increasing the damage of Soul Cleave as well. We'd like to see Spirit Bomb used intermittently to apply frailty, but Soul Cleave should be the spec's primary source of healing and damage. What are you talking about? That is such a big change. Like, I mean, come on, that's ridiculous, isn't it? So the fact that they're basically saying that they want Spirit Bomb to no longer be the top DPS on that's not. First of all, a 20% damage increase to Soul Cleave. Is that going to do that? I don't think it is. But either way, that's pretty nuts. I mean, did they nerf Spirit Bomb 2 that I'm not aware of? I don't know. But that paragraph here is like the biggest commentary on a tank that I think has ever been made by Blizzard in this alpha. So this is a pretty, if that's actually what they intend to do, like if that's not just some falsehood, then I think they should buff it even further. We're going to have to test this out. But yeah, the fact 20% increase to Soul Cleave already changed a lot about Soul Cleave. So that's kind of crazy in its own right. So let's keep going. Agonizing Flame no longer increases the damage of Immolation Aura. It now increases its duration by 50%. Again, increasing the duration of Immolation Aura increases the value of the talent's movement speed buff and creates synergies with other talents like Infernal Armor and the redesigned Charred Flesh, which we haven't read yet. So let's look at this in game. Agonizing Flames, okay? Let's take a look at this real quick. So here is the talent row, okay? So Agonizing Flames is on this row here. They already nerfed, yeah, it's this one. Infernal Strike, they nerfed something. I don't know. Anyway, so this row is pretty competitive, I felt like even before this. But so they changed Immolation Aura increases your movement speed by 20% and its duration is increased by 50%. So I already have that. So now you see it lasts 8 seconds, which I guess it says actually over 9 seconds. So you can't see it because of the webcam, but 14-second CD, and it says generates Fury over 9 seconds. So yeah, only 5 seconds of downtime given this. And of course, the more immolation, or the more haste you have, the more immolation auras you'll have too. So over time, I think this is a really strong talent. I really like this talent anyway, mostly because of, just the fact that it increases your movement speed. But yeah, anyway, so let's keep reading this because it goes even further than this. Feast of Souls healing is increased by 25%. Developers notes, this talent is intentionally straightforward, offering an option that makes Vengeance primary soul consumer soul cleave better. It's a fine option, but may need additional tuning to close the gap with the more active talents in the row. So let's again look at this. So we're talking now about Feast of Souls, which is right here. Feast of Souls, where'd it go? Oh, right there, of course. Anyway, okay, yeah. Soul Cleave heals you for an additional blah, blah, blah over 6 seconds. And that's on the same row with Fallout. Immolation Aura's initial burst has a chance to shatter lesser soul fragments, and Burning Alive every 2 seconds. Fiery Brand spreads to one nearby enemy. So, again, what they said was talent is intentionally straightforward, offering an option that makes Vengeance primary consumer Soul Cleave better. It's a fine option, but may need additional tuning to close the gap. So this one's probably like not, I don't think this is very, like, I don't think buffing this, I don't know, I don't feel like this is very valuable. I don't play a lot of Demon Hunter on live, but to me, this one really strikes me as a very interesting talent. But Jix has always talked a lot about Burning Alive and the potential of Fiery Brand kind of spreading around and doing all this cool stuff. So I'm interested in seeing what happens with some of these talents, but I feel like this was a really boring talent anyway. And if they're kind of going to put all this power on Soul Cleave, then I worry that the spec might get even more boring because, I don't know, it's fine. It's a cool spec. I like it, but I just feel like it's kind of, compared to Blood DK, it's quite boring at times. But anyway. Okay, so here's the big one too. Charred Flesh has been redesigned. Okay, so this is a big one. Immolation Aura damage now increases the duration of your Fiery Brand by 0.5 seconds. Okay, is this what it did before? Yeah, Fiery Brand increases the fire damage of your abilities that your abilities deal to the target by 20%. So that's what I used to do. Now it changed. So immolation aura's damage changes or increases the damage of your fiery brand by 0.5 seconds. So, and that presumably, okay, let's read first before we make any assumptions. Fire damage alone was not an attractive option when compared to the other options in the row. This interaction with immolation aura can significantly increase the uptime of a key defensive ability while also increasing its overall damage. This creates interesting synergies with anything that modifies fiery brand or immolation aura, such as the talents that we've been talking about. So now let's talk about, again, in-game, charred flesh, another great talent, but it's on the spirit bomb row. So we talked about, kind of hinted at spirit bomb no longer being the go-to. And I like this one a lot, but I like charred flesh now, especially because increases the duration of fiery brand. So presumably, I mean, I really should have tested it, but unfortunately I haven't. Let's see if we can't test it real quick. But yeah, so charred flesh. So if we put these two talents up, we fight a couple mobs here. What's this person fighting mobs? They're beating us to it. I was gonna come over here and fight these mobs, but let's see if we can't get a bunch of mobs on us. We'll see what it looks like with with how these two talents might interact. Okay, so we're gonna put up fiery brand, and then we're gonna use immolation aura. It's gonna spread, and it's every time it ticks. Every time it ticks, it's increasing. So it's potentially, like you see, it keeps spreading and it keeps increasing. And then of course, if we had even more, we're gonna do it again. So it's gonna increase even further. Yep. So it eventually runs out. But so that's and this is early in the expansion, right? I mean, like, you never know what this might look like late in the expansion. And I am very interested in seeing what this class might look like late in the expansion because of these talents. So the burning alive situation with some of these options that we have now are very, very interesting to me. And I already liked what happened with this spec. Like, it was already interesting to me, but I think that they are making some very, let's put it this way. They're making decisions that are a lot more logical than the classes had decisions made for it before. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, it seems like they're finally understanding what they want vengeance to be. Whereas pretty much through all out BFA, I felt like they didn't really know what they wanted vengeance to be. So it's very encouraging to me because I've always liked the concept of vengeance. Obviously, it's kind of like the brother of blood in some ways, right? They have very similar style of play at times. And you would think that it would be my second favorite tank, especially because a lot of the powers that vengeance has are the weaknesses that blood has. So they kind of yin and yang very well. So I would definitely like to play it more, but Shadowlands might be the place. So let me know what you guys think about those vengeance changes. Like I said, Jix was very happy about them, I think. Maybe he'll leave his comment down below, but it was really, I felt like it came out of nowhere, especially the soul cleave. Like this topic that they're talking about here, this is really big. This is a really big deal, a bigger deal than people probably realize. Because if you play vengeance at all right now, you know that Spirit Bomb is, besides like the whole Thunderclap. The thing is, if you could use Spirit Bomb as often as you could use Thunderclap, it would be like, vengeance would be like Prot Warrior, right? So it's a different situation, but per usage, I don't think there's an ability that does more damage than Spirit Bomb. So for them to say, we'd like to see Spirit Bomb used intermittently to imply frailty, but Soul Cleave be the spec's primary source of damage. What are you talking about? Right? Like, that's a huge, those words mean a lot, I feel like. So, but anyway, there's one other thing that I do want to talk about today. So, this is kind of like the future of tanks, what we're going to be talking about in the future here, okay? Now, there's a couple posts here. I'll put them in the description if I remember, hopefully. Hopefully, I will remember. But yeah, this is all about what's called Soulbinds, okay? So if you don't know what this is about, basically it's kind of like the new endgame progression. So I think it's kind of a mix of maybe everything that we've had up until this point. Legendaries are a lot like legendaries from Legion, and I guess they're kind of like Azerite armor in BFA, but realistically, I feel like the Soulbind is kind of the combination of all the BFA systems into one system. Between AP, the neck, between the Azerite armor trades, stacking and all that, and then even, essences and corruption at times. You could kind of look at these systems as kind of the grandfather of this system. So it's a very boisterous system. So you should read about this yourself. I don't want to go over too much about it, but what we do seem to know based on the data mining and talks from interviews and articles is that there's going to be a lot of customization here. Like, for example, let's take a look at this. So this is a Soulbind calculator. There's going to be apparently 3 Soulbinds, meaning you can pick one of these. And then I don't know how changing it works. I think they said you could change them often. But yeah, so I could pick Pelagos now that he's changed his pronouns. It's really good. And then here's kind of the calculator for it. So it shows you what you can do here. And I'm pretty sure these colored things are the conduits, which is what we're going to talk about now. And then there's these abilities here, which are just the Soulbind kind of talent tree. So using a spell or ability increases your versatility by 1%. Using another spell or ability increases the amount by 1% when it's not a repeat of the previous spell or ability. So stuff like that. And then they don't actually know if you start at the bottom or if you start at the top. Presumably, based on this, it looks like you might start at the bottom because this is a class ability and this is just some generic ability. But anyway, there's some interesting ones here. You can read some of these. They're kind of cool. For example, like Phial of Serenity renders you immune to curse. If you know what, they're basically all modifying a actual ability that's based on the Covenant. Phial of Serenity, that's the like kind of the generic one for Kyrian, the one that's not related to classes. There's two abilities you get. Valiant strikes. You and your foes, or you and your allies, nearby allies. Critical strikes grant you a stack of Valiant strikes up to 40. At 40 stacks, you heal nearby allies for 5% of their maximum health. So these are pretty cool. This one may be interesting. Upon death, your armor continues to fight, allowing you to fight for an additional 10 seconds. That's pretty cool. I mean, that sounds like that'd be interesting. Who knows? Who knows what these are? You know what I mean? Nobody knows right now. They're not testable. But the reason we're talking about them is because they represent what the future might look like for these classes, okay? We're talking about things like, oh, Vengeance looks cool and Blood Decay looks cool, blah, 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 all these things. But then you have to start thinking about what might come out, like kind of through the weeds that makes them even better. And that's where the meta starts to develop. So talking about class changes and structural like systems and integration of these powers into the spec is great. But you have to start thinking about what the future might look like with these things in place. What would be powerful? What would be underwhelming, right? Because we have a very clear dichotomy of that in BFA, don't we? Like, there's some Azerite traits that are absurd, and then there's some that are useless, right? So we have to try to start thinking about which ones are good, kind of like just like as a blanket, they're valuable. Which ones are only good, that might only be good because they're numerically powerful. And then we have to start thinking about which ones might be good for specific types of content, right? And you have the ones like Glimmer of Light, which is just good for all content, numerically powerful. That's getting added into a talent tree. So this is not just about Shadowlands. This is about like what the game's going to look like for 2 years and maybe even 3 years. We're talking about maybe 10.0, what some of these things might end up being so powerful. They might transcend the character and the system. They might come into the game permanently. So just start thinking about some of this. Like, have a look around. I'd like to hear your thoughts on these. You know what I mean? Like, the effects of combat potions last 10 to 100% longer. I mean, who knows? Some of these things might be absurd. So this is always my favorite thing about WoW, right? We had a lot of people on the channel, historically especially, they're very apt to give like, oh my god, this would be so cool if this thing happened. And I love hearing about that. That's one of my favorite things. But we're going to talk about these conduits now. So if you haven't seen this, apparently this is some like data mined conduits. So these are specific to your class. And I don't know how it doesn't seem like anybody knows how you earn them, okay? But it's kind of like a new talent tree, right? They've basically been talking about something like this since Wrath, right? The Path of the Titans, that's what they were calling it. Ultimately ended up being very similar to Legion Artifact, AP, kind of all these systems put together. That's kind of what they're after. Now, this looks a lot more like it, right? So anyway, apparently conduits are slotted into marked slots, currently separated into 3 types: throughput, survival, and utility. So we saw that. Let's go back to this Soulbind calculator. So we saw that the colors. So what is it? This is like a Dreamweaver. This is the name of it. So I don't know if this is important or not, but like you could see here, here's a yellow one. So apparently yellow, based on this, is a survival conduit. Okay, so that's a yellow one. Here you could pick. Now this is a bit weird. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to draw too many inferences from this, but like, this is a survival one, this is a utility one, and this is a throughput one. So apparently these are going to be switchable very quickly. They said choosing a covenant is going to be very permanent. or like near permanent, but then choosing like switching your Soulbind apparently is going to be very, very easy. Apparently, I don't know, but so we'll see how that actually plays out. But like realistically, if you have to choose between, let's be serious here, as a non-tank, right, especially, but as a tank too, do I want survival? Do I want throughput? Do I want utility? You answer that question for yourself. Tell me how you would react. Anyway, so let's take a look at this. So this is also, there's druid ones here. So we're going to also read the druid ones quickly. But basically, these are presumably things that you will slot into these. And it looks like there's going to be a lot of options. Oops. It looks like there's going to be a lot of options because there's already quite a few here, okay? So here's the druid ones. Cyclone leaves the target reeling, reduces their movement speed by 50%. And this is a utility one, a blue one, right? So, okay, cool. Kind of, kind of boring. I don't think you're going to be using Cyclone a lot as a bear. The cooldown of Typhoon, Maim, Incap, Roar, and Ursul's Vortex are reduced by 10%. Now that one's good. Having better uptime on Incap, Roar is great. Of course, Typhoon and Ursul's Vortex, these things are related to your what was the talent that affinity. Your affinity actually says controlled affinity. So actually, I guess all of these things are. Oh yeah, all of these 4 things are the 4 different affinities. Okay, but does that mean as a bear you'd have Incap, Roar, and you'd also have one of the other 2? I guess that's probably intended. So yeah, either way, bear might be the best to come out with this because yeah, if you pick Typhoon or Ursul's, that could be good. 10% more. It's a low number, but they're talking about it stacking too. Like again, there's multiple yellows here, so you could presumably put 3 of these in, and then Ursul's Vortex might have a 30% reduced. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. So anyway, when Stampeding Roar ends, it continues to increase movement speed by 10% for 8 seconds. So I mean, this is already really sounding a lot like the Azerite armor traits, right? Especially because they stack. Presumably, like I said, looks like there's only a couple blue ones, but presumably, let's see what some of the other ones look like. 2 blue, 2 yellow, 3 blue. Oh wow, so they're all different. This is 3 red. Okay, so yeah, I guess they're all a little different. This is very interesting. This system seems really cool to me. So again, start thinking about ones that, like, if you could make one, if you were in charge of making this system, what would you add for bear? What would you want to see for bear? Maybe like every time you use Iron Bark, it applies a shield for 5% of your health. So that's what I would add. Something like that. Something like that. That'd be cool, right? Because that's already in like something like that in the game, right? So anyway, Master of Shapes. These are survival ones now. Gain 8% dodge in cat form. Who cares about cat form? 4% armor in bear form. So that would be the one that you'd use for bear. Or if you're out of form, you heal more. Okay, so that's cool. 4% armor. Ethereal Shape. Soul Shape reduces damage you take by 15%. Now, I'm pretty sure Soul Shape, that's the name of the one of the Covenant abilities, so I guess these are specific. Maybe that's the case. I don't actually know that if that's the case, but anyway, this one's pretty cool. Your regrowth healing over time is increased by 200% on yourself. Now that's really good for bear. You'd be surprised how good that might be for bear. I mean, compared to other ones, it's probably not great, but I like the concept here. 200% for the healing over time, and regrowth, of course, lasts quite a while. So a lot of times you could put regrowth on yourself before combat, shift back to bear, and yeah, that's going to do a fair amount of healing. So I really like potential here that bear turns into a self-healing tank. And then also, here you go, Bark Skin applies Iron Fur, and its cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. So like things like this is really cool. I could see these being really good for bear, some of these. And then all of these are literally not relevant to bear. They're all things for bombkins, so I won't read those. But let's go to warrior, because these are way more interesting, okay? Now again, we talked about all of this stuff for a reason. We talked about warrior being the tank with the most changes that led them in the negative. So now read these and start thinking about how these things might take them out of the negative. This is important. This is not just some fluff video of nonsense that people aren't going to care about for months. You need to start thinking about what the game could look like when these things combine. Because if they don't work or they do work, it's important that we understand that as a community and give the feedback that's needed for the system when it comes out. Unfortunately, Blizzard is not going to give it to us earlier than they can. They just don't work like that. They're not going to give us a system until it's actually ready to be played. And maybe this Wednesday, we're going to learn more about that. But right now, what we do find in the game files, it is important to understand the theory, like the concept of it, okay? Not just say like, we'll wait and see, which is what I've been doing for a while now. It's time to start thinking about this. The game is coming out, and we won't say because Wednesday I'm sure we'll know, but it's coming out sooner than we think. Let's put it that way. You know what I'm saying? So it's fast approaching. So let's read these. Indelible Victory. Impending Victory / Victory Rush heals you for 400% of the damage it dealt over 8 seconds. That sounds like that would be really freaking good for blood, or for blood DK. Yeah, it'd be great for blood DK too. But you know, we don't actually know what kind that is, right? So is that a defensive one? Presumably that's a defensive one. Intervene reduces damage taken by the target by 10%. Now I could already see this one being really good for raids. If you could stack multiple of those, like we were talking about, you could reduce the damage the target takes by, I mean, it already reduces it, you know what I mean? I don't actually remember what the actual number is, but yeah, you could be doing a significant amount of reduction to your co-tank, you know what I mean, if you have a bunch of these, and presumably they're going to be easy to swap. Iron Maiden, Protection. This is apparently only for protection. Also says initial though. Revenge has a 0.4% chance to refund a charge of shield block, and also Slam. So I see. So Slam, I don't know why anybody would use shield block as a non-tank, but if you want to, you can do it. But so yeah, Revenge has a 4% chance to refund a charge of shield block. I mean, that sounds like that would be really good, doesn't it? Overpower has a 6, so that's arms. Intimidating Shout can withstand 80% more damage before breaking. So I wonder how that synergizes with that new talent. I can't remember the name of it now, but the one that kind of changes Intimidating Shout, knocks them all back. Malice? Something like that. Anyway, Slam crits, that's not relevant. Rallying Cry's duration and health granted are increased by 20%. So that's another huge one. I mean, I could already see these turning Warrior into like this insane utility tank. Some of these seem like that's what they're after here. Like, we already seen the legendary that increases shield wall, right? So, like, all tanks are going to get that. Presumably, it's from a Cataclysm 4-piece bonus. But if Warrior gets it, it might very well be one of the strongest ones because shield wall is just such a flat defensive CD that it's always going to be good in some content. So if they get that, plus, you know, you basically, like, almost double your health pool with Rallying Cry with all of these buffs that they're going to get. You know, if you can put 3 of these in, presumably that would make it 60% more on top of whatever it is now. I think it's, what's it, 15% or something? So yeah, that would be a pretty big health bonus. I mean, if it works that way, I don't know. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. But these are the things that I'm trying to think about when I'm talking about tanks right now. Execute increases the critical strike chance of execute, stacks up to 6 times, so could be good for offense. Here's another Stalwart Guardian, has a different thing for prot. The cooldown of shield wall is reduced by 20 seconds. That one's okay. I mean, maybe you stack it high, it might be good, but seemingly that's pretty low for a longer CD like Cold Wall. Cold Wall? Yeah, it's called Cold Wall now. Anyway, and Brutal Vitality. 6% of your damage you deal adds to your active ignore pain. If this was in BFA, this is like the whole reason we're making this. If this was in BFA, what are you talking about? Could you imagine? If you could stack, if this was on an Azerite trait, if you could stack 3 of these. Okay, so there you have it. Talked about Warrior being the worst tank, and now after reading this, you're starting to think, wow, it can come around real quick. But it's not just Warrior getting these. What other things might tanks get? What would I like to see for Blood DK? I don't want to speculate. I don't even want to get into the weeds right now with that. Just let me know what you guys think. Hope you had a great holiday weekend if you are in the United States. Otherwise, hope you're enjoying the summer. Let me know what you think. I'd still like to get into dungeons and testing all 6 tanks in dungeons. Unfortunately, I'm going to show you this right now. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a problem here. Okay, we won't even do that. We'll just go 50 to 60. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. 17 players online. Actually, this is a lot more than I expected. But 17 players are online, guys. There's only like 6 people who could actually heal. It's not easy to do dungeons when there's 17 players online, okay? Now, I've done it before and there's like 5 players online. Let's see if there's anybody sub 60. Every once in a while, somebody's logged off since then, so there you go. Yeah, less than 20 players online. Really hard to do dungeons. So we talked about that a couple of videos ago, but Unfortunately, I'm not interested in waiting potentially 2 hours for a single dungeon, so let me know what you think. I'm very excited for the future of these systems. I really, really, really like this system. I like a lot of the class changes as well, and I think this might be the best version of, people call it borrowed power, almost pejoratively. I like this. I like these systems because it means that for the next 2 years, we have a fresh potential, I'd say, to min-max our character in interesting ways. Not just like, oh, what's best mathematically. I know a lot of people function that way. They rather just figure out what's best, have it told to them, and never question it. That's not what I do. And I try not to encourage that here either, even though, a lot of the times the math is the right approach. I like to see interesting things. I like to see things like, when we were stacking Ineffable as Bloody Key. That was fun. That was interesting. Might not be the best way to play the class, but it was very fun and interesting. So what will these systems do for each tank? And if you have some thoughts on what they should do, let me know down below. Thanks for watching. We're going to see you guys in the next one.